Your friend's cool.
My friend's Kool-Aid.
Always after me Lucky Charms, the frosted oat cereal with sweet surprises.
Fashion has that real, old-fashioned taste.
25 cheap. Grocery items everyone bought in the 1970s. What have we lost when we forget the little things that once helped us survive? Not everyone remembers, but it was precisely these cheap grocery items that truly nourished an entire generation. They weren't glamorous, didn't have famous brands, but they were all that people could afford. Today, let's go back in time to re-savor the dishes that have become unforgettable symbols of childhood, if you grew up during these difficult times. Government cheese. There was a giant cardboard box, unlabeled, looking like military-grade stuff, and you knew that inside was the food security net provided by the government. It wasn't the kind of cheese you find in supermarkets today with fancy labels or distinctive flavors. Instead, you'd find a solid block of orange cheese, seemingly indestructible, capable of surviving a nuclear explosion. The first sensation when touching it was its firmness, sometimes a bit waxy. A solid block you knew would last forever in your fridge, waiting to be transformed into a meal. Its taste was an unforgettable combination of school lunch and desperation, a flavor that only those who experienced it truly understood. It could be thickly sliced for sandwiches, melted to make a sauce for pasta, or even fried for extra crispiness. But no matter how hard you tried, it never melted properly. It stuck to the pan like glue, clumped up in grilled cheese sandwiches, turning casseroles into an indescribable rubbery mass. However, in those lean times when the fridge was empty and the paycheck had run out, that solid block of orange cheese was as good as gold. Its seasoned, crispy grilled cheese sandwiches was the secret to making pasta edible, and most importantly, it filled you up. You know, for millions of families, government cheese was the difference between having dinner or not. A survival dinner. Canned Spam. When you think of meat that doesn't need refrigeration and hardly needs a reason to be eaten, you're thinking of canned Spam. Opening a can of Spam was a special ritual. You'd open the lid with a key or simply your finger, then carefully slide out a mysterious block of meat covered in a clear jelly. The initial feeling might be a bit unsettling, but you knew it was meat and it would fill your hungry stomach. Its taste was unmistakable. Very salty, greasy, and so processed that when you ate it, you could feel a slight squeak under your teeth. You could slice it thin, fry it until crispy and charred, or simply douse it in mustard to mask its distinctive flavor. Spam's role in 1970s family meals was undeniable. It was meat, filling simple sandwiches, topping hot rice, or mixed into macaroni to add protein and fullness. You could flip it like pancakes on a hot pan and call it dinner. Many called it a savior in difficult times, when fresh meats were too expensive or unavailable. Spam was cheap, shelf-stable, and extremely effective. Its main purpose was to feed 4 people with just 1 can. Powdered milk. Your mom probably often told you, chill it, it'll taste a bit better, and strangely, she was right, at least somewhat, enough for you to swallow it. Powdered milk, an essential item in many 70s households, was never really considered a delicacy, but rather a daily chore that needed to be done. To prepare powdered milk, you would mix it in a large plastic pitcher with the intense hope that all the lumps would completely dissolve. But unfortunately, they seemed to never fully dissolve no matter how much you stirred. Its smell was often described as chalky, and the taste was often likened to a challenge to the palate, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. Especially if you accidentally drank powdered milk when it was still warm, it was truly a punishment, not a pleasant or refreshing drink. Powdered milk was often used flexibly in various dishes. It was poured into morning cereal bowls, added to mashed potatoes to create thickness and increase volume, and mixed into baking dough to save fresh milk, which was an expensive commodity. The main reason for its widespread popularity was that fresh milk was not always available, while powdered milk was cheap and available forever. It was often used to stretch the meager amount of fresh milk that fortunate families had, turning a little fresh milk into enough for the whole family. Generic peanut butter. Generic peanut butter was a real gamble every time you bought it. but it was a gamble that countless families in the 70s were forced to take due to economics. This type of peanut butter usually came in a simple tan glass jar with just a plain white label that read peanut butter and no brand information or eye-catching images. When you opened the lid, you often saw a layer of oil floating on top, while underneath was a block of peanut butter as hard as cement, and often a knife stuck right between the two layers, a sign that you needed a bit of muscle to stir it evenly. Its taste was often described as bitter and bland, not comparable to famous brands, but anyway, that meant there was a sandwich to eat, a basic and filling meal. You would spread a layer of this peanut butter on stale slices of bread. Sometimes you were lucky enough to have a little jelly to sweeten it, but sometimes it was just sugar, and very often there was nothing else but the peanut butter itself. This dish often stuck to the roof of your mouth, creating a slightly uncomfortable feeling. It stayed there for a while, but the most important thing was that it kept you full until dinner, a significant effect for a cheap food. It was significantly cheaper than famous brands with extensive advertising, and most importantly, it lasted longer, helping families save on grocery expenses. Kool-Aid packets. Kool-Aid packets were truly a simple form of magic that children and families in the 70s loved, especially if you had enough sugar to mix it. For just a meager 5 cents, you could own a small envelope containing colored powder and countless dreams of a cool, refreshing drink on hot summer days. Popular flavors like bright red cherry, deep purple grape, vibrant orange, or golden yellow lemon were all familiar choices, bringing a bit of color and flavor to daily life. To prepare it, you just poured the powder from the packet into a large plastic pitcher, added water, and then sugar. Maybe a full cup, even 2 cups, depending on the desired sweetness and the amount of sugar you had available. No matter how much you diluted it to save, making it a bit difficult to drink, it still remained cool, brightly colored, and most importantly, it was your own drink, a simple joy. This drink was famous for staining your clothes, dyeing your lips, and even your kitchen counter. Do you have any special memories of using Kool-Aid or generic peanut butter? If you could go back in time and re-enjoy one of these foods, which would you choose and why? Share your story in the comments. Boxed macaroni and cheese. More than just a dinner, macaroni and cheese was a clever budget strategy. That box cost less than $1 and could feed a whole family if you were creative. Inside the box were elbow macaroni, a packet of neon orange powder, and a little milk if you had any. If not, water would do, as long as you could mix in the cheese powder. If you've ever tasted it, you'd know it was quick, filling, and guaranteed no one would complain much. Sometimes you added chopped hot dogs or canned tuna for extra flavor and protein. Other times it was just macaroni and cheese, accompanied by a prayer that everyone would be full enough. The box said it served 4, but you could stretch it to 6 if desperate, diluting it further to ensure everyone got a portion. The main purpose of this dish was not high-end flavor, but to ensure everyone got a portion and no one went to bed hungry. For many families, it was no different from a main meal, a basic item bought because there were no other options. Canned fruit cocktail. Canned fruit cocktail was dessert if you were lucky, a rare bright spot in the simple meals of the 70s. It often floated in a sweet, thick syrup, sometimes looking more like a science experiment than an appealing dish. In this canned fruit mixture, you'd often find strangely translucent grapes that hardly anyone truly liked the taste or texture of, but you ate them anyway because that's all that was available. The real reward, the highlight of this dessert, was the bright red cherries, which brought a bit of color and special flavor. You'd spoon the fruit cocktail into small bowls, often chilled to enhance the taste, and pretend it was a luxurious, high-end dish, even though you knew the reality. The syrup itself gave a feeling of luxury, to the point that after eating all the fruit, you wouldn't waste a single drop, but would drink all the syrup as if it were a special and precious juice. Canned fruit cocktail was sweet, cold, and most importantly, it was better than nothing, a common philosophy of life during those difficult years. Frozen TV dinners. A complete meal neatly packaged like a well-prepared dinner plan. You opened the silver tray and saw a full meal. Meat, starch, vegetables, and something pretending to be dessert, all neatly arranged in small compartments. It felt like a luxurious meal, a personal adult food tray that you didn't have to share or serve. You placed the tray in the oven, hoping everything would cook at the same time. Sometimes the meat could be lava hot on the outside, but still frozen inside, a culinary surprise. You felt luxurious, even sitting in your pajamas on the carpet, eating in front of the TV. That was the real delicacy. At a time when family dinner was the rule, TV dinners were an exception, a small box of quiet, solitary satisfaction. When money was tight, they were a way to feed everyone without mess, without fuss, without waste. A convenient and efficient solution. It saved both time and money as much as possible. Off-brand cereal in a bag. Off-brand cereal in a bag wasn't cool, but it was affordable. No cartoon mascots, no eye-catching cardboard boxes, no surprise toys inside. Just a giant plastic bag containing crispy shapes that looked almost like the famous brand, but with a slightly strange taste in each variety. Mom often bought it, not because the kids liked it, but because it lasted all week and, more importantly, cost less than a movie ticket. A significant saving for the family. Although this type of cereal was known to get soggy quickly when milk was poured in and often stuck to teeth when eaten, you still ate 2 bowls clean and called it a good morning because it had fulfilled its duty of filling a hungry stomach. This cereal was sold in large bags, sometimes too large to fit in cramped pantries. In the 1970s, buying off-brand cereal was not something to be ashamed of. On the contrary, it was considered a smart and practical action, a way to wisely manage the family budget. Frozen fish sticks. Frozen fish sticks, though not a fancy or luxurious dish, perfectly fulfilled their duty in countless family meals. They were often sold in a familiar blue box, neatly and evenly stacked like small logs, ready to be brought home and cooked. Each fish stick was covered in a pale orange batter, sometimes difficult to keep crispy after baking or frying. Inside that batter was a mysterious block of meat from the sea, white, flaky, and bland, but perfectly acceptable when eaten with ketchup or tartar sauce. Mothers loved them not only because they were easy to prepare, but also because they were cheap, frozen, and could last for months in the freezer, creating a reliable source of protein. Children also loved them because they looked like nuggets, easy to hold and eat. You arranged them on a baking sheet, flipped them once, and hoped they would turn golden and crispy. But even if they came out soft or burnt, no one complained. In a house where fresh fish was too expensive, frozen fish sticks gave you a seat at the table and a full stomach at bedtime. What unforgettable memories do you have of these foods? Share below. Day-old bread. Day-old bread was truly a hidden treasure hunt if you knew where to look, a secret of frugal living in the 70s. You wouldn't find them at regular bakeries, which sold fresh loaves at high prices, but at discounted day-old bread stores, often small and lesser known. On the shelves there, you could find all sorts of discounted bread, from regular white and wheat loaves to squashed sandwich bread or broken bagels, all lined up like lost toys waiting for a new home. The scent of those fresh loaves was wonderful, and the price was even better. You could buy 5 loaves for the cost of just 1 at the supermarket, an unbeatable bargain. You would mostly freeze the bread you bought to use later and eat the rest quickly to prevent it from going stale. If the bread became dry, you could use it to make stuffing for chicken or duck. If it was too old to eat, it would turn into breadcrumbs for fried dishes. Hot dogs and bologna ends. They were like meat, cheap, and most importantly, almost impossible to spoil, ensuring they could be used for a long time. While regular meats were expensive and out of reach for many families, at the butcher counter, if you asked politely, the butcher might generously give you the ends. Pieces that couldn't be sold at full price, sometimes looking like they'd been through a shredder due to their irregular shapes. Small pieces of hot dogs, bologna, sometimes even salami mixed together randomly. All of them were tossed into a pan to cook, no need for anything too elaborate or complicated. This was a snack, and you had to know how to make it effective and nutritious enough. No one cared if it looked a bit strange or unappetizing. Because it was lunch, it was protein, and most importantly, it cost almost nothing. These scraps of meat were a secret weapon in the kitchen. You could stretch them for days, feed a whole group of people, and still have something left to add to eggs the next day, turning them into a new meal. You could fry them until crispy, bake, boil, or even eat them cold with a simple slice of white bread, depending on your preference and what was available. Store brand white bread. Store brand white bread, cheap, soft, and hard to keep together. But it was the glue of your grocery list. It came in a flimsy plastic bag that would tear if you looked at it wrong. Although it stuck to the roof of your mouth like paste, its role was irreplaceable. From simple, quick sandwiches to crispy toast for breakfast, or appealing French toast on special occasions, and even breadcrumbs for fried dishes, it did an astonishing job. It was truly effective at stretching each meal a bit further, turning a small amount of filling into a full meal. You could roll it into a ball and eat it plain when desperate. It was so soft it felt like a snack, even though it had no special taste. At half the price of famous brands in a decade where every dollar counted, this was the bread that anchored daily diets. Canned Vienna sausages. A small but mighty dish. Canned Vienna sausages, soft, salty, and a bit strange, but they were effective. You popped the lid and pulled out a row of pale, jelly-covered mini sausages, packed tightly in mysterious water. They smelled like a meat factory and looked like baby food for adults. You could eat them cold straight from the can with crackers for a quick snack, or fry them in a pan and call it breakfast, and it was a reasonable and filling breakfast back then. What made them an MVP, most valuable player, in every family's pantry was that they were cheap, portable, and surprisingly satisfying for hunger. Especially, they didn't require refrigeration, which made them an ideal choice for power outages, storms, or long weeks before payday when the fridge was empty. Instant mashed potatoes. Instant mashed potatoes were a miracle, even if they tasted like wall paste. Just add water, maybe a little margarine, and stir until the flakes turned fluffy. It was science, it was magic, and it fed a whole family in 5 minutes. You would have to learn how to make that amount of mashed potatoes last, diluting it a bit to have enough for everyone, and adding salt until it had a slightly more palatable taste. They looked like real food, filled you up like real food, and most importantly, they cost much less than a bag of fresh potatoes, a decisive factor for many families. Although sometimes there were small lumps left or powdery bits, and sometimes a strange film formed on top when they cooled too quickly, they were still satisfying enough. Have you ever made any dishes from these ingredients to turn them into your own specialties? Share your secrets. Tuna in oil. Canned tuna in oil was a pantry hero. Oily, fishy, and 100% budget approved. Back then, tuna in water was considered a luxury. Tuna in oil was the standard, and it smelled like it could cleanse a room. But it was protein, and most importantly, it was cheap. Canned tuna was cheap protein, always available at the back of the pantry. You mixed it with too much mayonnaise or too little either way. It ended up between 2 slices of bread or in a cold pasta salad with peas, and you ate it as if it were perfectly normal. It lasted for months, came in multi-packs, and was frequently on sale. In homes where meat was scarce and fresh food too expensive, canned tuna was the closest thing you got to something healthy, and it always delivered. Canned ravioli or spaghetti. Chef Boyardee products were often considered a real lifesaver, a quick and easy solution for meals. You just opened the can, poured the entire contents into a pot or microwave-safe bowl, and boom! You instantly had a meal, without much effort or preparation. The sauce was sweet, the pasta was soft, and the meat seemed a bit suspicious about its origin, but you didn't care about those details when you were hungry and needed something to fill you up. This dish was warm, filling, and gave the feeling that dinner was taken care of even when the pantry was almost empty, a small sense of security. With a 2 for $1 promotion, you could feed all the kids and still have enough for lunch the next day, a significant saving for the family budget. You would slurp the ravioli as if it were the most gourmet dish ever, savoring each bite carefully, and spoon the spaghetti as if it had just been brought to you by your Italian grandmother, full of love and traditional flavor. Store-brand ramen noodles. Ramen noodles weren't cool but were considered appealing. They were sold in simple, plain packages with no fancy fonts or complex designs. Just the words chicken flavor and a small seasoning packet full of salt, and dreams of a delicious meal. To prepare, you just boiled water, dropped in the noodle block, and waited for the noodles to soften. A quick and easy process. The accompanying seasoning packet was always too strong, delivering a powerful and salty flavor, but that was the point. It masked the fact that you didn't have real ingredients to cook with, turning plain water and instant noodles into a full meal. Ramen noodles were survival soup in under 5 minutes. A quick meal to get you through hunger, and somehow, they always provided the necessary warmth and comfort, even if only temporarily. They cost just 39 cents a packet and were worth every penny. An extremely affordable food. 1 packet could stretch your dinner, while 2 packets were enough to feed a roommate, demonstrating maximum economy. Minute rice. Minute rice cost almost nothing, could fill half your plate, and most importantly, it went with everything from meat, fish, to vegetables. Rice was the way you stretched leftovers most effectively, turning small remaining portions into a full meal. It turned a simple can of beans into a complete dinner, soaking up broth, combining perfectly with canned tuna, and filling every empty space on your plate. Rice had the ability to turn one meal into 3 different meals with a little creativity. There was always a bag of rice in the pantry, often torn and spilling grains all over the shelf. But the presence of that bag meant dinner was guaranteed, and you would never throw it away. Every grain was precious. The next day, you could fry the leftover rice with eggs and call it a new dish. No one would realize it was just yesterday's leftovers. Canned evaporated milk. Canned evaporated milk was a shortcut, a substitute, and sometimes a last resort. It sat stably on the pantry shelf next to powdered milk and somehow felt a little more special. It was thick, bland, and slightly sweet, pouring slowly as if unsure of itself. It was added to coffee for creaminess, to mashed potatoes for extra flavor, to baked goods and sauces to make everything creamier. You could mix it with water and pretend it was regular milk. When you did it right, it made everything creamier, richer, tastier. Evaporated milk was the secret to homemade macaroni and cheese, fancy scrambled eggs, and the best banana pudding your grandma ever made. 1 can could stretch into 2 meals if you played smart, and it never went bad, meaning it was always available when the fridge was empty. Canned green beans. Canned green beans, they were often mushy, salty, and a familiar, almost fixed item in the pantry of every poor family in the 70s. They were packed in large metal cans with simple green labels and metal lids that you opened with a distinctive rotary can opener, a familiar sound in the kitchen. Although they rarely had the bright green color of freshly picked beans, often appearing gray or light brown after cooking, with a little salt, a small pat of butter if available, they were still considered vegetables and appeared on the dinner table. You would eat them on major holidays, on any given Tuesday with a simple casserole, or mixed with macaroni, or even by themselves when there was nothing else to add to the meal. The water in the can was also not wasted. It was often used as an ingredient in other dishes, making the most of everything. Although they were watery and sometimes a bit tough, they were still counted as healthy, and mothers always made sure they were on their children's plates because at least it was a vegetable. Jiffy Corn Muffin Mix. Jiffy Corn Muffin Mix, that small blue box truly contained magic, and was the cheapest convenient food you could make at home in the 70s. That small blue and white box cost only a few cents but promised something warm, golden, and sweet enough to please everyone. An easy and quick dish. Its aroma when baking was more captivating than anything so cheap was allowed to be, spreading throughout the house and creating a cozy atmosphere. The corn muffins would come out soft on top, crispy at the edges, a perfect combination of textures, and always disappeared completely when dinner was over, not a single crumb left. This mix was truly the backbone of so many meals and families. You only needed one box, maybe two for a large family, to create a perfect side dish, complementing the main course. You would serve it with baked beans, with spicy chili, with butter and a little sugar to turn it into a sweet dessert. Margarine in a tub. Margarine in a tub was the loud, cheap cousin of real butter, and it was a familiar, almost indispensable item in the refrigerators of every poor family in the 70s. It was bright yellow, stored in a plastic tub with an easy-to-peel foil lid, and had a slightly buttery smell, but also something a bit strange about it, and it was always reliably available. You would use a butter knife to scoop out a large spoonful and spread it on toast that would tear in the middle due to its softness, a familiar sight of a quick breakfast. Real butter was too expensive and luxurious for many families, so margarine was survival for them. It was effective in adding richness and flavor to dishes, and more importantly, it lasted forever without spoiling, helping to save on grocery costs. Another interesting thing was that empty tubs were often reused for countless other purposes, an act demonstrating maximum frugality. From storing leftovers, soup, Kool-Aid, salad for lunch, to catching cooking grease. Bulk oatmeal in cardboard canisters. Bulk oatmeal in cardboard canisters was cheap, hot, and exactly what you needed to start a long day with minimal energy. The oatmeal box was usually tall, cylindrical, and always had a light dust on the outside, a sign of its long existence in the pantry. You could eat it plain, with the simple taste of oatmeal, or add a spoonful of brown sugar for sweetness, or slices of bananas when they were on sale, sprinkle cinnamon for aroma, or a pat of margarine for richness. You were forced to be creative not because you wanted to, but because you had to make the meal a bit more varied, avoiding the monotony of a repetitive dish, and that made it perfect in its role. You knew you were poor when oatmeal appeared on the table 5 days in a row, but you also knew it kept you full when other cereals ran out, and that meant a lot for ensuring health and energy. You would measure a cup of oatmeal and start cooking. Mix with water or with milk if you were luckier and had some available. A little salt in the pot, simmer, and a wooden spoon constantly stirring to prevent burning. Dry pinto beans by the pound. You bought them in bulk in large plastic or paper bags with a twisted string on top, with a handwritten price. You poured them into a bowl and picked out the pebbles, a repetitive but necessary task. Then you soaked them for hours, sometimes overnight. And when they were finally put into the pot, they would simmer all day, filling the house with steam and the slow, steady aroma of something nourishing and real. You could add salt, a ham bone if lucky, or just onions and hope. The final result could last for more than 3 days if you portioned it correctly. When meat was expensive and groceries were tight, dry beans were not only cheap but also reliable, an abundant source of protein for the whole family. A pot of pinto beans could feed the whole neighborhood, the church basement, and every poor family trying to get by in the 1970s. If you also grew up with these foods, leave a comment and share your story. We'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Back to Yesterday to continue exploring journeys back to the past. Thanks for watching until the end. See you in the next video.